Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 16. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture with the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank those of you who have liked, shared, commented, and subscribed to the show. Your continued support allows us to highlight and bring on more expert guests, just like our guest today. I also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength, for bringing you this episode for free. Owned and operated by active lifters, Cerberus is trusted by the top strength sport athletes and lifters in the world. Cerberus's wide range of products are made by athletes for athletes, truly living up to its moniker, made by the strong for the strong. From sandbags, training gear and supplements to lifting straps, knee sleeves, and more, Cerberus Strength provides the highest quality strength products on the market, designed and manufactured to help you defeat, destroy, and devour your competition. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to use promo code STRENGTH_GAME at checkout to receive 10% off your next order at cerberusstrength.com. And in this week's episode, I'm joined by a friend of mine, former strength coach and now sports scientist, Alex Carnall. Alex is an instructor and applied sports scientist at the University of Memphis. As an instructor in the School of Health Studies at Memphis, he teaches several courses in the field of exercise science, in addition to supervising undergraduate interns and contributing to the efforts of their Human Performance Center. Prior to shifting his career focus to sports science and biomechanics, Carnall was the assistant director of strength and conditioning at Campbell University, as well as previously a volunteer at the University of Montana and Campbell University, a student assistant at Texas Pan American, and a coach at Sport Specific Training Canada in Oakville, Ontario. Carnall is also a former college baseball outfielder who played 2 years at Cisco College before transferring to finish his final 2 seasons at the University of Texas Pan American. Nowadays, he's an Olympic weightlifter who has competed and medaled at the local, state, and national level in the former 85-kilo weight class. Like I said, I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Alex Carnall. What's going on, everybody? I'm excited. I'm joined by my friend, Alex Carnall. He is a coach over at Memphis and sports scientist, as well as a teacher. Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for joining the Strength Game today.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me, buddy. I'm pumped up. I listened to a couple of these. You got intro music. You got sponsors. It's everything, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. Yeah, I got a little flack for the intro music, but I like metal, so this was my way of tying it in, and it's my show, so
it's your show, dude. Don't let them tell you what to do.
Hey, so let's get right into it. You got a really unique background. We've known each other for a while, like dating back to actually your strength conditioning coaching days. I know you've taken a career shift, and like I want to get into what kind of prompted that, or if that was always kind of in the cards. But first off, I really want to kind of get going with, how'd you first get involved in lifting and like in the strength game? Like what sports did you play growing up, and what have you been doing since?
Man, growing up, so I'm from Canada, obviously just outside of Toronto is where I was born, and kind of grew up there, went to school there. And so high school sports, if you're not playing rugby or hockey, you're not really like doing anything. So if you want to play any kind of competitive sport, maybe you can get a crack at going to the US on a scholarship or something, you need to join like a club team, you need to be on a travel squad somewhere. So coming up, I was doing a little bit of everything. I was like, I was really into like skateboarding, snowboarding, wakeboarding, and then it turned into basketball, volleyball, baseball, volleyball. I wasn't very good at hockey, but I should have stuck with it probably. Anyways, what it wound up being was I played baseball. I turned out to be okay at it despite all of my physical limitations. And I wound up going down to Texas. I lived there for 5 years. I went to a junior college for 2 years in Cisco, Texas, which is one of those kind of blink and you miss it cities on I-20. And then I transferred after that to what is now UT Rio Grande Valley, which is in the southernmost tip of Texas, closer to Mexico than anything else. And when I was in junior college, I roomed with a guy who was a lineman at a 5A high school in Texas, where at the time that meant nothing to me. I'm like, 5A, like, what is that? And so he went to US Trinity High School in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And he was in my sort of outfield position group. And this guy was like 6'1", 230, and he had forearms like sewer pipes. And just like, I'm like, dude, you look like an athlete. Like I was 165 pounds coming out of high school at 5'7", 5'7.5" with my cleats on. And so I was like, dude, you got to show me some of this. Like, can you get me started, like training a little bit? And so we would be down, in junior college, the class schedule is not terribly demanding. Like I think in the fall we went to class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and in the spring we went to class Tuesday, Thursday. So the rest of the time we're hanging out, like, hitting the Xbox or whatever else, hitting in the cage, to the point where I was so motivated to just like change myself physically because I was so inspired by what this dude looked like. And I was like, all right, man, like, let's do it. And so we're in the weight room, like, before practice. We're in the weight room again after dinner. We're basically eating like everything we can get our hands on. And I think by the spring of that year, I was around like pretty comfortably around like 180, 185, which, at my lowest, that probably represents about a 20-pound jump. So that was a big change for me. And I honestly just fell in love with it. We had like our assistant coach was our strength coach in JUCO. And he was just like, it was one of those things where it was kind of like we were doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And you got guys doing like step ups on like foam benches with 80-pound dumbbells in each hand. And you're like, this is dangerous. But, there was sort of a culture there of like, you did it. Well, guess what? I can too, or I'm going to actually show you up and set the bar a little bit higher. So that was infectious, man. And it just became like, in a town where there's not much else to do besides get in trouble, it became actually like a really healthy way to spend time. And I just fell in love with the way that it changed my body and the way it changed my performance, and how I felt, man. Like I just, I was sleeping better. I was a little bit more conscious about what I was eating, all those things. So it was a lot of like really positive things came away from that. And then when I transferred schools, we had a new strength coach come in during my senior year. His name is Joe Collins. He's at the University of Missouri now. But, I had some academic stuff happen, and it wound up taking me 5 years to finish my degree. That's the short version of the story. And the coaches were like, look, we can sort of extend your scholarship here. If you give 15 hours a week back to the athletic department, you can go shag volleyballs, you can take tickets to the basketball game or whatever. And I'm like, that sounds boring. And so I just went and talked to our strength coach. I was like, look, man, I got to satisfy these hours. Like, you and I get along. I love being in this environment. Like, can I just hang out with you? And so it's a smaller Division I school. We've got, I think at the time, 20, maybe 21 teams, no football, and a weight room that's actually like a converted cafeteria. So like the hole where you used to put your dishes through was like actually plywooded, like shut with just a piece of painted plywood. And Joe, at that point in his career, he'd been around the block a little bit. He's worked in a lot of cool places, worked for some cool people. And I think he was at a spot where he was like, yeah, this will do for now kind of thing. And he just he poured into me, man. Like we had all those groups and he was on his own with no help. And there's me, student assistant, who's just doing the controllable things right, showing up on time, staying the duration of the day. Like it got to the point, funny enough, where like, okay, I was under the impression we're going to do 15 hours a week, and now I'm skipping classes so I can train the tennis team. You know what I mean? Like it was just I got bit by the bug, man. And his attitude and his sort of like knowledge and things like that was just so inspiring. I was like, this is it. this is what I'm going to do. And at the time, I didn't consider anything else. It was like, as soon as I graduate, I'm going to get my certification. I'm going to hit the job boards, man, and just put out any and everything I can.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a cool way. And I think I've talked to a few of my like former coaches before, a few guys that actually been on the podcast before, and they were athletes of mine. And then I think they had a relative idea that they wanted to get involved in coaching, but then they started interning, and then like that kind of flipped the switch right away that, hey, this solidifies it. This is what I want to do. And it's cool to see that like kind of stuck in a weird position of what to do, and you kind of just fell in love with it. And that's awesome. I know it, like your coaching journey has taken you to like Montana and Campbell recently as well. What kind of switched it for you? Like, did you know, like talking about all the benefits that you got from actually like lifting twice a day and getting involved and actually training when you were playing baseball, like what kind of shifted it though after your coaching career? Did you know like what you wanted to do sports science, or what kind of intrigued you about that side of the field, even though you're still involved with athletics somehow?
I think what it was for me was, I was academically speaking, I guess you could say I was a late bloomer in a lot of different ways. In one sense, like I just shared with you a minute ago, like I wound up going around the horn for a victory lap in my undergrad. It turned out being the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because it gave me a year to spend with Joe and like just learn from him and just pick his brain, man. I can't think of another experience where you have someone with that many years under their belt where you can just sit in an office with nothing else to do but just talk to them, and just learn and soak up as much as you can. I think from there, like I went home and, he did well to get me in touch with some people and set up a couple of interviews that, I had applied for a graduate assistantship, and I got some help from him and one of my baseball coaches, to sort of pull some strings and get me those interviews. But it really, what it felt like and what I was told most of the time, despite, I wasn't ready for a GA job or something like that. I needed more time. Nobody, I don't think, is ready in a semester, a year even, to become a good enough coach to do some things like that independently. But it became pretty clear to me that nobody really wanted to hire an international person because they didn't know exactly what that entailed. Like, are we allowed to pay this person? Are you going to be a student technically? Like, how does this work? So, that it seemed to be more hoops than people wanted to jump through. And I don't fault any of them, because, if I'm in that position, it's like, why am I going to bend over backwards for somebody who's unproven? And, like, I have no reason to take you at your word that you know what's going on here. So I don't fault any of those people. And I completely understand. But that summer I got home, I got my certification. That was job one. And then, maybe it's naivety, or maybe it happens to everybody, but you think like, man, as soon as I can put that CSCS on my resume, phone calls would be rolling in. And of course, we all know it's not the case. It's just, your resume looks different and nobody reads it still. So I was applying for jobs, man, that I didn't even want. And all I thought I knew is that, like, boom, the next step is a master's degree. That's what I do. I go and I get my master's and then I roll on. Well, I didn't get my master's until I was 27. And in the time between, like you were pointing out, I spent time at the University of Montana. I worked at Campbell University for almost 4 years, maybe a little bit longer. I worked in the private sector for like 8 or 9 months. That's not for me at all. I don't like the business end. I don't like chasing people down and asking for payment or finding out if they're, if they have any sessions left. Like, I just want to be on the floor. I want to be working with people, helping them get the most out of their time. And, frankly, I get paid by the hour. So there's no incentive for me to make sure you're up to date on payments. Frankly, I could care less. Let's just get to work. So all of that said, I think through those experiences, I got a lot of exposure to different things, different teams. You sort of get I've heard you talk with a couple of your other guests about how, it's funny when these teams start to sort of personify themselves and they take on like human characteristics, like this whole team has one personality kind of thing. So learning that, of course, is like super valuable, and just being able to, turn it on with different groups and appeal to people in different ways and stuff like that. But it got to the point at Campbell towards my later sort of years at that job where, I was reading a lot of research, and I was getting involved with one of our faculty members actually in the PT school, working on a couple of like simple biomechanics research projects and things like that. And I was like, man, this is where you get a chance to like do some real measurement. This is where I can gain some experience to where, not only it's not to stick on my resume, but actually if I spend a little bit of time in the lab and I cooperate with these people, now I'm actually going to be better equipped to digest the research that I want to read that's going to help my athletes. And so that, I think, was the time for me where I was like, man, as a coach, I felt like I could be doing so much more for everyone that I was working with. But my limitation was that I didn't have access to some of the tools that I wish I did. And I didn't have like, just the knowledge in order to like read the research I wanted to be reading and understand it at a level that allowed me to actually make, some sort of executable plan. And so I was really inspired by that, like that experience with some of our faculty researchers. And so I started poking around a little bit. And it's funny, we talk about all the time, we talk about doing the little things right and the things that you can control and making sure that you have that buttoned up as tight as you can get it. And it was actually, so I wound up in Memphis on recommendation from Joe Collins, my first boss, who was working in the athletics department at Memphis at the time. Another guy named Dr. Doug Powell, who was a physical therapy faculty member at Campbell when I worked there. We met through the soccer team, and we started we go have breakfast and just talk about stuff. Well, he's now a senior faculty member here at Memphis as well. And so it was like, and then there's another guy, Dr. Max Paquette, who's one of our lab directors as well. He's downstairs, another Canadian guy. So I'm like, I was like, oh, that would be cool. I'm interested in this program. Joe's telling me we're doing some stuff with our baseball team and kind of, starting to just sort of breach the threshold of getting athletics into the lab and vice versa. I was like, man, that sounds like my kind of fun. So, I'm scrolling down the faculty roster and I'm seeing, oh, I know that guy. I have something in common with this guy. I actually worked with him, and it was just, it felt like too many of the right people in the right place at the right time for me to not pull the trigger. So I came here in 2017 as a master's student, as a 27-year-old master's student. And, most of the people that I worked with, like all my sort of peers, if you will, maybe 5-6 years younger than me in some cases. But for the most part, not a lot of experience. So the nice thing for me was they're like, okay, well, here's your job. We need you to come up with a thesis. We want you to help with these projects. And also we need you to teach these 2 classes. I'm like, great. What does a class look like? And they're like, well, the other guy just left. So really you're sort of on your own. But without that experience, without working with those athletes, without, just kind of be willing to wing it, man, you learn a lot of improvisational skills when you're trying to hold up some sort of front that athletes trust, even in the back of your mind, if you're like, I don't know if this is going to work, but still you earn that confidence from them, and it makes you you're a plug and play in any environment, So that was sort of my inspiration, man, was just the want to get in there and see what research really looks like. Let me get my hands dirty a little bit. Let me learn some more about, what are these measurement techniques and how can this help us? And, where is that bridge between academic research and applied, coaching or teaching or even just training, right? Where is that connection, and can we get a little bit closer to it?
That's really cool. I know it's an interesting way to do it because like you talked about when you were trying to get your CSCS and you're like, hey, everybody will be calling, this is the next step. When you switch and you frame your mindset the other way, hey, now like, this is what actually like fires me up. This is the passion I have for it. This is the direction I want to go. The pieces end up falling in line because like you're built for it now. And I think you brought a different kind of aspect to the master's program, and the way you taught it, like you kind of reverse engineered it differently than everybody else does. You already had the experience. You just need the accreditation at that point. And that's kind of the easier part. And that's the fun part. When you already have the experience, you just need the proof that says, I'm ready to do this. But I like what you said really about the bridging, like the connection between academic research and like the coaching side of it. Like, I know you do a lot of stuff with Memphis and the human performance like model and the sports science department there. Can you give us like a background on what you specifically and like what the University of Memphis is doing, like specifically to outline your position and role, and then what like the entire department, how do you guys work together with strength conditioning, the sport coaches, or sports medicine? Like, what's the connection between you guys?
Wow, that's a big one. When I first got here, some of the faculty members, we have the cool thing about being in our unit, we call it, within the College of Health Sciences. Our unit is called the Exercise, Sport, and Movement Science, basically specialization or concentration, if you'd rather call it that. And so one of the nice things about our faculty is that a lot of us have like athletic backgrounds, like actually come from sport, whether that's as an athlete, as a coach, or both. We've all had, if you will, some skin at the game at some point. And what they were building that I've responded to when Joe told me was, we've got like some of our pitchers coming in to do some motion capture analysis and stuff like that in the lab. So that connection was sort of there to some extent. But I would say the impression I got was that it was sort of infrequent, and it was more like for special projects type of thing, and that sort of thing. But right around the time I finished my degree, which was 2019, in the spring semester actually, we hired a guy by the name of Dr. Daniel Greenwood. I'm going to call him Dan from now on when we're talking, but he's from the Australian Institute of Sport. So we got lucky to kind of cherry pick him. He'd been there for a while working with some of the Australian Olympic teams and things like that. And he had a background in biomechanics as part of his sort of like master's level work. And then he did his PhD work in motor learning and skill acquisition. And so we brought him over to be the head of what we call the HPC, which is the Human Performance Center. And while athletics is definitely a big piece of our interest because it's in-house, it certainly makes things easier in terms of like, well, if we need to get over there, we can have people come across the train tracks. We can do stuff in the lab, or we vice versa. We just rip down there and we're in the weight room or we're on the field or whatever we need to do. But that's sort of the setup or the 30,000 foot view of it. We also have like substantial interest in helping just the rest of the community as well. So we're happy to do things like, we've had like a CrossFitter who wants to know what his VO2 max is on the rower. And it's like, yeah, we can set that up for you, man. We can make that happen. So it's like, come on in. So stuff like that. We're working on a few things to get more involved in like the high school athletics community around here and try and build like, sort of that culture of like, maybe to where we're allowed to kind of diversify and broaden our reach a little bit to more populations and more groups, and try and help them put something together that's going to be really productive as well. So that's sort of the high level sort of version of the story. Was there a second part to that question? I don't remember.
Yeah, I just was trying to figure out, I wanted to see like how the HPC, like how you guys are actually working in concert, like what specifically you do, like within your role. I know like you're an instructor, like you teach classes as well. And then like specifically with the sports science side, but like you kind of answered it there with what you guys are doing. Not only are you working with like the varsity sports at Memphis, you guys are working with the community and other people that kind of involved. I guess to kind of piggyback on that, a lot of the stuff you guys do, like you guys are publishing articles and you're going through research and doing your own stuff. Like, do you work to try to like bridge the gap with sports medicine and strength conditioning to like educate the athletes as well? Like, I know you guys go through and actually get publications for data and everything, but how do you kind of make that relatable either to the high school community or just Memphis in general or to the athletic department? How do you kind of decipher that to make it usable?
I don't know, I've known you for a while. Let me ask you a question to kick this one off. What might be, we all know some department or some people or some colleagues or something that, in the last 4 or 5 years or something, all of a sudden there's like it says sports science on their business card or on their bio or whatever. In like maybe in a couple of sentences, what's your impression of what sports science looks like in college athletics in the United States right now? Let me simplify. What do those people do?
I think for a sports scientist, if it's just a sports scientist, I think the role for them is to find a way to take decipherable technology and data collected from either sport or athletes just in general and decipher that to a coach or any other staff member to make it either usable or applicable or create change within either training practices or reactionary from data collected from matches or practice.
Nice. So I think at the high level, I'm on board with you there. What does that look like practically in most cases, would you guess, or do you know to be true? Like maybe just two or three things, like what are those people doing day to day, as far as you know?
Most of the time, and I've fallen victim to, I refuse, I will never put sports science on my thing because I know what you guys go through, but I've run GPS and I've had to run like different force plates and stuff within systems. By no means a sports scientist. A lot of the times it ends up, I'm just sitting in front of a computer and I think we collect a bunch of data. And the biggest thing what do we do with that data? How often are we doing it? Is it actually creating change is my biggest thing. Like we're spending money, we're spending a lot of time, and we're making sure that there's protocols in place, but what actually is benefiting because of the technology is my biggest thing.
Yeah, look, man, I appreciate you kind of entertaining those questions without any lead up or warning. But I think like across the spectrum, I think in many places, like your description is pretty well, at least in my perception anyways, is pretty good characterization of what sports science sort of looks like right now. I think also that sports science is like that awkward teenager right now who's still trying to figure out who they are. They're going through middle school and they're looking, what's going on over at the other school, like maybe what's going on at other universities, what's going on overseas, what's going on, in other countries and in other organizations and levels of sport and things like that, and trying to figure out exactly like as a collegiate sports science, like what am I, like where do I fit in and what really is my job description. And so, that was one of the things that we really kind of, that we talk about a lot is sort of like our mission statement, right? And in a sense, it's almost like sports scientist is kind of like student athlete, right? It depends on who's saying it and what day it is to determine what it means, kind of. Like, are you the student athlete or are you the student athlete? Are you the sport scientist or are you the sport scientist kind of thing? And, that's a long-winded way of saying like, we're a little bit of everything at the moment. And so related to your original question about kind of, how do we bridge that gap and what are we getting out of it and everything else. It's, we've done, when Daniel showed up, his vision for us was that everything's going to be on a project-based approach, which means if you're going to open something up, you're going to open this can of worms that is some specific question to do with sport. We're going to set a start date, we're going to set an end date, and we're going to determine exactly what it is that we're looking to get out of here. Okay. Right. So, there's, Kettering said, a problem well defined is a problem half solved, and so my sort of perception in a lot of cases is like, people are like, yeah, we're on like month 35 of collecting this GPS data and we still haven't done anything but make some graphs. Like, okay, so where do we take that to the next step to where we're actually starting to derive meaning from measurement? And this is going to sound absolutely insane to anyone listening that might have a good feel for like the academic setting, but we haven't published one paper out of all the data we've collected so far. And that's because our interests and our objectives are so closely aligned with coaches and athletes, and the main outcome being performance, that frankly, I'm not sure a lot of what we've done is really of any substantial academic value. It's us trying to solve problems. And, there's a really good paper came out of the AIS. It's sort of a review concerning, there's a couple actually concerning sort of what sports scientists and what academic researchers' perceptions of each other and of the same things kind of are. And so what you wind up with is this comparison between, okay, me as the sport coach and that guy or that girl as a sports scientist. Here's your topic. Okay, rate the importance of that topic out of 5. And across the spectrum, it turns out they can't agree on anything. Not meaning they're arguing, they're just valuing things differently. And then in the later part of one of these papers, the question becomes, okay, well, what's a valuable trait in a sports scientist? And again, you're asking the coaches and you're asking the researchers. Okay, if you're going to be a scientist, what matters in sport? And what you see is exactly almost a mirror reflection where coaches consider the sports scientist's history, experience, and ability to build rapport with athletes and other members of the sort of the performance team. That's obviously really important to them, right? You've got to have a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of background, and just enough that you're not like that awkward person out there that doesn't know how to talk to my athletes, and now you're making everybody uncomfortable. On the other side of the coin, the researchers value over the coaches things like conference presentations, publications, more academic type endeavors, because that's the yardstick that they're measured by professionally. So how do you find the middle ground when both groups seem to have such differing objectives, right? For the coach, their professional measuring stick is their win-loss column. And for the researcher, maybe their professional measuring stick is how prolific you are from a publication perspective. Did you author a textbook chapter? How many papers have you written this year? What kind of funding have you secured from external sources? And so we're in a really weird position. And, we got there when Daniel's like, look, we are not going to anybody with a question. In other words, we're not coming from our offices in the College of Health Sciences and we go knock on Coach Silverfield's door and say, hey man, we think, it would be in your best interest to start measuring, I don't know, like taking urine samples from your guys before practice. And we'd be really appreciative if you could make sure that gets done. And exactly what that person is going to tell you. Right? Because it's like, who are you, first of all? What's in it for me? And why in the world am I going to spend even a minute of my 20 hours a week doing something that doesn't serve my mission, doesn't serve my players potentially, and doesn't make use of the staff that I have, payrolled. So it doesn't make any sense to go about it in that direction. Now, I recognize that in a lot of cases, that's often the way these conversations start, because, it winds up being, someone with an academic interest or a researcher that goes and talks to coaches and say, hey, we think, essentially what you're saying is, hey, we think you should care about this. And that's like the most asinine thing you could ever hear from someone who, one, maybe you've only met through like email or a phone call, and number two, doesn't share your objectives, right? This academic person doesn't get measured by how many games my team wins, right? They get measured by whether or not they're able to print something out of this. So it's like, our interests and our objectives are so misaligned. There's no room, there's no viable relationship there. Now, what Daniel did, obviously he knows this stuff and he's got so many years working with like elite level coaches and athletes. The thing that he said is like, we're never going to initiate a project and just kind of like sit on that. I don't remember exactly what the words were, but that was it. And that was the idea. And so his first like 6-8 months here probably was time spent going out and, having lunch, having coffee, get a beer with some of these coaches and just kind of, get to know them in a way that, okay, maybe after the second, after the third occasion, you actually really get to know somebody. The first couple of times it's like, I ask these questions, Nick, what's important to you as a coach? And you're like, well, I think it's important that, we're doing the best we can to read the research and implement the most recent recommendations and stuff, because that's what you think I want to hear. Okay, well, let's put a pin in it and let's pick up next time, maybe same time next week. Okay, and maybe you start to come clean about like, man, you know what? Like, I'm really interested in figuring out how to get these kids 40 times down. I'm really interested in figuring out how to manipulate body composition. I'm really interested in a nutritional intervention. I'm interested like this, that, whatever. And so what Daniel's been amazingly successful at doing is kind of breaking down those barriers and inviting people into a place where they trust him enough that they can tell him what it is that they are actually interested in. And that kills about 5 different birds with the same stone, because number one, we're partnering with athletics. Number two, the coaches are driving the questions that we ask and that we try to answer. So the nice thing about that is like, me and Dan sit around and I was sitting in his office. I was telling him, look, man, like I had a realization one day. I was like, dude, I don't think I've ever been a sports fan. I don't think I've never been a sports fan, and I'm still probably not. I like watching our teams at Memphis because, now I have some stock in that, right? And in some sense, I'm like a stakeholder there. If I have something to do with their performance, now it matters to me. But, prior to that, it was like, I used to know people, they put the jersey on to watch the game on Sunday night and the team loses and they shut down. They won't talk to you ever again. And I'm like, dude, like, I still got to go to work tomorrow. It doesn't matter who wins. I still get paid the same. Like nothing changes for me, right? So I was like, I've never been a sports fan, but what I really like is like solving these kind of problems. This is still very much in my wheelhouse in terms of interest. And now all of a sudden it's like, we have coaches that want to know things and we have tools that can help them measure that. And so with this project-based approach, we take a question from a coach, we try and narrow it down to exactly the specifics. We put the right team together. We set a deadline, most importantly, and we figure out exactly where and when we're going to do these measurements or testing or whatever. And so what ultimately comes out of that is like, it's a really nice partnership where, in our role, I guess you would consider us like another branch of like support staff maybe. And that's fine. I'm perfectly happy to be that. But when the questions are driven by the coach, you get so many amazing things. You get time, you get compliance, you get access, you get enforcement. Okay, so if you're doing something where, all right, we're going to develop an intervention as a result of this, with this question that you asked. Here's our recommendation. Here's the data. Here's the recommendation. And now you've got some stock in that because it's your question. And if it matters to you enough, like you said it does, guess what? You're going to go out of your way to make sure that stuff gets done. What if I can't be there every day and it's my question that got asked? Like, it'd be really nice to spend an extra 5 minutes on like some tactical component of the training session today. Like, let's just bang that intervention and we'll say we did it and whatever. So, a lot of really nice things happen when the communication flows in a different direction and when the questions come from a different place. And it really gives us a nice opportunity to side with those coaches and really just work with them, so it gives us an opportunity to act as in partnership with them and, ultimately just help them execute their mission, which is to either improve their athletes and improve their sort of outcomes as a whole, right? Get better performance, win more games.
Damn, that's a lot. That's awesome,
right.
though. That's really cool to hear. I'm glad you cleared it up. Like, I guess that kind of sums it up, like the perception of a coach thinking of a sports scientist or anyone doing research. My first forethought was, hey, oh yeah, you guys of course are publishing research. Like you must be, like, you guys are collecting data all the time and doing this stuff. Like, and I can see why they're like right off the bat, like there's a difference of opinion or even just a difference of perspective of what you find value in and like what you think my role is and what a coach thinks a sports science role is. And I like how you guys flip the script and build a relationship with them, build some rapport, figure out and dive deeper than just like a first meeting, what actually they want to accomplish, and actually dig deep into what actually drives them, what is important to them, and then you let the research take it from there. And I think that's kind of cool. And I think that helps with like, you take stock in what they take stock in. As the research goes, you'll follow it. You're not really tied to something specifically right now. You guys will go in any direction as long as it helps with the performance and it helps with that partnership. And that's really cool.
If I want to add maybe one other thing that I kind of breezed past there was, when Daniel's doing these initial sort of interviews with the coaches and sort of just like, it's not even an interview, right? It's just sit down and chat and whatever, with their sort of permission and understanding, like, you recorded a lot of this stuff. And so one of the first undergraduate intern projects that we had come out of the HPC, like, we take students, we have grad students, we have undergrad students. One of the first projects was, okay, take all of these interviews, like, however, I don't even remember how many hours of stuff it was, but basically running through the transcripts from that, what are our themes here, right? And he came out with, there was, it's funny that you mentioned the same thing, like, GPS, force plates, stuff like that. If you had to guess, it's going to be different everywhere. If you had to guess what might be like the top 3 interests, you could say maybe like categories or something, from sport coaches that they want sports science support for.
I would say those 2 for sure. And then, injury rates is the other one that I would say. And I think those all kind of coincide together.
So yeah, I think you're right. And maybe to specify the technology or whatever is maybe like too narrow of scope, but it was appropriate for the other conversation. Like, you don't get a lot of coaches being like, yeah, we want to do force plates, but yeah, along those lines, a lot of people, maybe operate under the assumption that, every sport should be doing some kind of like, load monitoring. Every sport should be doing some kind of like, whatever it is, right? And so interestingly, what emerged from that sort of survey, the number one need that coaches saw for something like us was athlete onboarding. In other words, they want for us to be helpful to them. They want somebody to help them find a way to make their freshmen not act like freshmen for a whole year. And that comes down to, there's a lot of maturation that happens in your first year as a college athlete, obviously, but it's the simple stuff, man. And I remember talking to like my buddy Mike at Campbell, who I used to work like basically in the same office as, and we had an intern say some like off the wall stuff about like, this is important. I would put this in a program. And Mike's like, look, man, I need people sleeping 8 hours a night and eating 3 meals a day, and then I'll worry about that. But that's exactly the kind of thing that these coaches are talking about, is like, they don't know how to look after their body. They don't sleep enough. They can't manage their time, and they have terrible nutrition habits, and they don't see the value in things like recovery sessions. They don't understand exactly what like treatment is. Like we need someone to help them basically grow up faster. And I was really taken aback by that because, it makes a ton of sense, but like us going in there with what might have otherwise been our agenda would have just hit a brick wall, but looking through these surveys and stuff, or these recordings and stuff, and finding out like, wow, you know what, like this shouldn't surprise us at all. That's like the most practical need I've ever heard in my life. And, if it weren't for them, we wouldn't have saw that. I think the second most sort of prevalent theme was something like pre-participation screening, essentially. So people wanting maybe some sort of support to learn if there are any like substantial issues with the way some freshman moves, or like a transfer or something like that. Like, can we find or highlight any areas where, this person's just like being really inefficient? Like, are we getting what we can get out of this athlete, or are they potentially at risk for injury? The third, which was like the drop off between the percentage of like mentions for those first two, and then the third is a little bit steeper, but it was a 99% sure it was like technique and skill. Basically, can we better develop technique and skill, or can you help us do that?
That's interesting. That's kind of, I guess if you sat there and really thought about it, it should be the obvious answer, those things, especially transitioning from high school or just to a different program, different state, whatever it ends up being. Like, those are some of the biggest things. And we look at it all the time with just turnover rate, with all these athletes that end up transferring or coming to different programs all the time. We can't just expect them to get thrown right in and then learn a new system, go to different classes, get in a different major, all these different stressors we talk about. Same thing you talked about with Mike at Campbell. Like, I'm not going to talk to you about supplementation or doing anything crazy if you can't drink water, sleep 8 hours a night, and like eat square meals, like nutritious meals. It makes no sense. You're putting the cart before the horse all the time. But that's really cool to see, like, all that stuff, and interesting, because I think most sports scientists, or the reason, like the places I've been at, the reason we bought technology was probably technique and skill. And then first and foremost was load monitoring. Like, what can we do that? But these other things are way more important, because if you're load monitoring someone that's not there in 3 months or is injured in 3 months, what does it make a difference? Yeah. Then now you have pointless research. But that's interesting to hear. And kind of flipping gears a little bit, like you're able to have these conversations. And like you said, everybody pretty much in the Human Performance Center that is actually conducting this research and going through all these protocols with the sport coaches, you guys said you have skin in the game. You've all had athletic experience. So you guys kind of know what it's like to go through either high school or college sports, or even for you, like competing after sports. How do you think like that experience and the benefits that you've gotten from actually competing both in college and then competitively in weightlifting, have helped you in this current role either relate to coaches or like help you like with the research you do when you're conducting it with those student athletes?
I think obviously my experience as a student athlete myself, it's kind of one of those things where you just learn the sort of the territory, right? So when you are able to share that with some of the student athletes that you're working with, whether they played your sport or not, you know, there's sort of that like knowing and understanding smile that's like, so you get it, you know what I'm dealing with here. And, you know, I think that was the best thing that I took from it. I don't think I became like, I'm not confident that being a student athlete made me better at really anything, maybe except managing time, and like, maybe that's it. Honestly, like getting a little bit thicker skin and like figuring out how to schedule my life. But like, you know, it's having that gives you the inside look at their culture that you can only understand if you were there, I think. You know, and maybe I'm sure there are people who are never student athletes that actually understand it better than I do, but just in a different way. You know, like I experienced what you do. I've been to study halls. I've been to like the like stupid weekend fundraiser stuff, like, you know, like all that stuff, man, that's just like, oh, you want more of my time now. And it's like, well, yeah, we're paying for school, so we pretty much ask you for whatever we want. But I think that was huge for me, is just like what I take from it now is just my ability to kind of relate that to the people that I work with and understand, like, you know, like even if you flip on the TV and you see like some of our football guys get drafted every year, and you see like some of our former basketball players in the NBA and stuff like that. And then, you know, I think the worst thing you can do is you have like, you know, some 7-footer walk in the lab for screening and everyone's just like starstruck, and like they don't like that. You know, it's like, as a coach too, you kind of learn how to talk to people, you learn how to manage people, you learn how to deliver what's important and tell them, look, this is what I need you to do. Ready, set, go. And just like, not, you know, at this, like, you know, you can't be working in a lab and then be like, hey, dude, like smile and take a picture for my Instagram and be like, look who I worked with. Like, no, that's not it, man. You're doing it wrong. So, you know, being involved in coaching and stuff where you can be around these teams and like you've had just enough of their, you know what, to be like, all right, shut up. Here's how it works. You know, because we have a job to do here. And actually we're taking your coach's time to do this. So we need to be pretty efficient. And so I think from being a student athlete, what I take the most was, you know, kind of having maybe even just that sliver of credibility that you understand what it is that they go through on a day-to-day and a 4-year timeline. But also, you know, having been in the coaching environment to where it's like, all right, well, once we get over the fact that like, yeah, you're working with college athletes, it's like, all right, let's make sure that we're actually sort of achieving the goal here. Let's get people moving. Let's give them the information they need. Let's, you know, if it's motion capture, let's put the markers on them. If we're outside doing stuff with like accelerometers, let's get that on them. Let's get them moving. If it's the GPS stuff, like, look, don't want to talk too long. Just send the data to me and let's get it sorted. You know, so I think that's what they really want to see, is people that are just ready to like plug and play, and they're not there for a t-shirt and they're not there for like whatever. And man, we've done the wildest stuff. Like we helped the sports medicine team put together their like COVID surveillance system. Like that was a project that we did. We have someone who we hired a postdoc, also another guy named Joe from Drexel who runs our like nutrition efforts, and he has his own grad students now. So he's out there like working, trying to set up the fueling stations, and like they're doing some like serious stuff, man. They're doing full team talks, but they're also doing like one-on-ones, you know, and so it's like we're just sort of like trying to chip away at some of that low fruit that, like, you know, like you said a few minutes ago, it's like, man, once you hear it, it's so obvious. You know, it's like, why would I go in there with any other expectation? Like, of course, nutrition, sleep, self-care, self-maintenance, time management, let's roll. you know? And so I would say I take those two things from my experiences. How's that?
Yeah. What about, I guess those are still good things. It's not, maybe not what everybody would say, like right off the bat. Some people really hold tight, like that college experience and everything. But I know for you, like you continued after college and maybe you didn't stay at a place for 4 years. Like everybody has a different experience, how they play collegiate athletics. But like, what about when you actually got involved in like competitive Olympic weightlifting? Like what drove you to that? Did you learn anything different like from your time? Because at that point you were coaching. So you were managing time again between that and coaching, like getting in the field and then trying to stay competitive with it. Like, did you learn anything new from that that's kind of applicable now?
I'll tell you one thing. As long as I was still full-time coaching, like making weight was never a problem. Like, you know how it is. You're like trying to smash a yogurt over here and like, just have a granola bar between groups or something like that. And most of the time it's not even enough. Cause then you're like, if you're outside running part of the session or like whatever, I don't know, man. That's like the leanest I've ever been in my life. So that was nice because you never have a hard time. You don't have to cut for anything. But I think at the time, like, I went through my like big powerlifting phase. Like, I sort of told you that, my first interest was like, man, I need to put on some size. Right. And so it's almost like there's almost this kind of like block periodization of life where, I bet the majority of us started like with a goal of hypertrophy in mind, right? And then it's like, okay, well, that's fun. I'm happy with how I look now. Let's see how much weight I can put on the bar. And you sort of transition into that higher intensity, lower rep range space where it's like, man, you know what? Like I've been digesting like weeks and weeks worth of like Louis Simmons videos and watching like all that old stuff and reading some of those old books. And like, there's a period in my life where I felt like starting strength and there's one other one. I can't remember what it was. It's like the best book I've ever read. And I was like, this is incredible. And so it's like, okay, let's get on the barbell. Let's get stronger, right? So it's size, strength. And then the next natural transition to me, it seems anyways, was like, okay, I put some size on, I gained some weight. I'm satisfied with that. I got to a point where, all right, now I'm weighing, I went from 165 coming out of high school. I think at my heaviest when I was in North Carolina, it was close to like 211, which was insane. That's still like, that's over 20 pounds heavier than I am now. And, I was like, that was the only time in my life I've ever bench pressed 300 pounds. As ridiculous as that sounds, that was it. I was convinced that day, if you could have put like 301/8 pounds on that bar, I wouldn't have finished it. But it was 300. It was the first and last time I've ever done that. And so I knew powerlifting wasn't really my thing. I hit a 500-pound squat. That was a big thing for me. I hit like a 520 something deadlift. I think it was 520 on the nose. And I was like, all right, cool. That's that. We hired a guy named Dave Overman who came to Campbell from Auburn University. And the first day he showed up and I'm standing there, I'm watching this guy and he's rolling in this beat up set of like old work sand plates and his own barbell and like his change plates. And he puts his shoes under the desk. I don't know if I saw him again that day. He was just like moving in, I guess. And, over the next week, I'm kind of watching and this guy's out here and he's snatching, he's cleaning, he's hitting some split jerks and that. And I'm like, that's sick. That's like really cool. Like the way it sounds, the way it looks, like, and also like the coaching side of me is like acknowledging how many different physical qualities or like biomotor abilities are encompassed by this one or two or three exercises. And I'm like, that's the ticket, right? So I was like slowly kind of like Dave's over here doing his thing. I would be in the rack beside like screwing around with some, like iron grip barbell, wondering why it doesn't rotate when I'm trying to catch my cleans and like whatever else. But I was like, man, I think that's the competitive streak in me. Like, I see what he's doing and I'm comparing that to, and I'm filming myself doing just some like Looney Tunes stuff. And fortunately I don't have any of that to look at anymore, but I'm looking at him and I'm like, I can do that. I'm just not there yet. And that's always been my approach to things. Like, I can, if I'm so motivated, I can get there. And, as a coach, like, coming from an athletic background, I didn't have anything in my life that to like compete for. As sad as that sounds, like, I'm not a big golfer. I'm not like I don't have a hobby that involves like competition. So I was like, that looks wicked. Let me get involved and try and figure it out. And, I put a couple of years into it, and I went to like two state championships, went to American Open twice. That was a lot of fun, but I don't know. I don't know if I took as much from it as I left behind with it. Like, that was my outlet. That was my competitive outlet, I think. And in my estimation, that is the limit of its purpose for me. It was a competitive outlet, and as a way, I listened to like some of your other guests too talk about like, and even for yourself, like, it's a really good way to kind of like model the pursuit of a goal to your athletes, right? And exactly what that entails. So thinking back to the comment about credibility, like, you're able to earn a little bit of credibility from having been a student athlete yourself. Well, as a coach, maybe you're able to gain even more credibility by showing them like, I have a meet this weekend too, kind of thing. And so I understand the importance of preparation and making sure I'm not burnt out, when I go to take my opener, kind of thing. So it's like, I don't know. I think, yeah, I'll stick with that answer. I think I left more behind with it than I took forward from it. But, that's experience that I've had that you can't take away from me now, and I learned, like, let me change that answer a little bit. As a result of training specifically for weightlifting, I'm confident that during those few years or that period of my life that I was a better athlete than I ever was in college. And I think what I learned from that is I gained such a respect for the complexity of those movements, because I myself, being as motivated as I possibly could be to learn them, took as long as I did to get it to a place where actually I was competitive. And that made me realize, okay, there's a ton to be gained here, but there's a ton that needs to be put in. And I think when I truly appreciated weightlifting for what it was, I stopped programming it for my athletes.
Interesting.
That's what I took away.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting way to put it. And like you said, there are some people that use it for an outlet, and you found a way to get the benefit out of it. I think you did the same thing with everything you've done with coaching, from like your time, like first getting started with baseball, or like playing in college and actually getting started in lifting. Then you took everything out of it and you found something new, and you collected an interest for it. And I love what you said. He was like, I can't do it now, but like I'm not there yet. And then you've worked your way towards getting to that point. And I think people take training or a sport or a career or a position, like, if you're not getting something out of it, or you're not making yourself better or putting yourself into the next step, then there's no purpose behind it. And I think you did a good job with that. And I think ultimately you found what your passion is now. And I don't know if I completely agree that you left more with it. I think you like from knowing you and knowing how much you put into lifting, and how much, like, people don't just qualify for the American Open. People don't just train every single day, like having 5 teams or going through their master's program or stuff like that. Like, I think you don't give yourself as much credit to the things that you actually put forth to actually continue to train at a high level and still find a way to balance what you were doing, like on the floor coaching, and all the research and everything you were doing on the side to make yourself a better coach, a better athlete, and be more credible. But I think everybody has a different purpose why they choose to train. And like, for you, it served its purpose. And for you, it was a different outlet. And for you, I think it made you a little bit more into the person you are. So I mean, I might be out of line saying it, but like, I think that you still found some sort of way to utilize that to your benefit.
Yeah, and maybe I just haven't reflected on it enough, and maybe I haven't tried to connect it to as many things as maybe I could or should. Even as I was talking through that answer, I changed my mind. I kind of reversed course there a little bit, and it certainly influenced my programming. That's for sure. That was the last thing I said, but yeah, maybe you're right, and maybe there is more there. I'm not sure, but what's next?
Hey, that's a good point right there. So I know you've listened to a few of the shows, so you probably got a good inclination. Like we're gonna close this thing off with a good finisher. So we got 4 quarters and 4 questions, and we'll fire them away. If you want to fire them off real quick, you want to take some time on them, whatever's more comfortable for you. But you ready?
Yeah, let her rip.
All right, man. Hey, so biggest influence in sports science or even the coaching side, and then biggest influence in weightlifting.
Wow. Okay. In order of exposure, strength and conditioning, number one influence was my first boss man, Joe Collins, who gave me more than I could ever give him back. That's the truth. No reason to trust me or think that, I would turn out to be of any value to him in the short or long term, but just poured into me, man. And so that's my hands down number one strength and conditioning sort of, what are we calling these people again?
Just biggest influence.
Yeah,
whoever impacts you. Yeah.
Yeah, no question about it. You could have asked me anything. Joe is the guy for that. Weightlifting was Dave Overman, because he was the one that I really saw do it in person, live in the flesh. And I was like, yep, that looks like it's for me. And I'm terrible. I had, dude, like those, you remember those like little tiny like foam heeled Adidas? They're gray and they had black stripes on the side and the Velcro strap with a little barbell on it.
Oh yeah.
Dude, I wore those. I was the worst weight man. Anyway, so Dave was, I haven't even talked to him in like 4 years. I don't know if he's going to hear this or not, but Dave, you changed my life, man. And then sports science, Daniel's never explicitly taught me anything, but I've learned a lot from him. And it's because he doesn't, I would say because he's closest to me, he's had an offer in the sports science world. I think he's the closest person to me. And that's, I feel like I learn a lot more that way as I do, trying to really learn who someone is, like through reading their work and stuff like that. But like Daniel's taught me a lot without ever teaching me anything. He models good behavior. He presents ideas that you can't argue with. He approaches everything so practically that it's just like, God, it's a no-brainer. Like, the same way we're sitting here earlier and we're like, man, it makes perfect sense that stuff is number 1, 2, and 3. And he just has a way of like talking to you that kind of, it helps you open up. It helps you be more reflective. It helps you like really evaluate what it is that we're doing and trying to put it in specific terms. So I think those are my 3 people that have been, close to me in each of those ways. If you would have said like, I don't know, there are other people on the HPC staff like Max and Doug who, like Doug was my thesis advisor, and so I couldn't, like, it's impossible for me to like discount those 2. They're incredible, but like Daniel being kind of the face of the program and bringing this perspective to me about like a project-based approach and about the direction of communication, like ultimately determining everything, like it makes too much sense. And it's that those lessons are too valuable, and that's where they came from.
Right on. Hey, so you kind of said you don't have too many hobbies, but when you're not working on projects and you guys aren't doing any sports science stuff, or if you're not competing or training anymore, what are you doing in your free time?
I'm probably doing my homework. Man, I'm a student too, and not everybody knows this, but as a faculty member, I'm allowed to take a free, like I get one 3-hour course paid for per semester by the school, so long as it doesn't conflict with my work schedule. So I'm doing graduate courses in our computer science department. So I'm doing right now, it's just graduate level coursework in data science. And so we're learning cool stuff about machine learning, and even doing what's the short version of the story here? Ultimately, the program is about deriving meaning from measurement, and that's what we do. So I'm probably working on that. And if I'm not, probably asleep, dude. I don't I don't know. I get around, man. Memphis is a really cool city. It's go out, kind of ride the skateboard, go watch some live music, crush some barbecue, that kind of thing. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff I like doing, but right now I spend a lot of my free time just cranking on some homework, probably.
Sounds like my day. Maybe not the same as Memphis barbecue, but riding around town, that's the way to go.
Sure.
So I know you've done a lot of things. What if you weren't doing sports science right now, and as an instructor, what do you think you would be doing? And if maybe Dave Overman didn't come in that day, would you have picked weightlifting, or would you have picked something else, you think?
Maybe not, man. I don't know that there was ever anything else that made me feel genuinely inspired to try weightlifting. Besides just hanging out with Dave and be like, man, and just watching him warm up and stuff. It's I wonder what it's like to hit that position and still be able to breathe comfortably. That's insane. Because it's another one of those things where it's man, we want to model this for our athletes, right? There's 3 ways I can tell you how to do something. I can verbally give you those instructions. I can write it down for you, or I can show you, right? Better yet, if I can do all 3 of those, now we've got something we can appeal to almost everybody, right? So I blame Dave, and I say blame on purpose. I blame Dave for my involvement and sort of affair with weightlifting. What would I be doing if I wasn't coaching or teaching or whatever? Because actually been working with the club rugby team too, working those guys out just to kind of scratch that itch. And they're fun, man. They're a fun group of guys to work with. They have their facilities are terrible. They don't have matching gear, but they're so motivated. It's incredible. What would I be doing? I don't know, dude. Probably something creative. I don't know. When I was younger, I played in a band. We used to play at little bars in Toronto and stuff like that. I like doing stuff like that. I like, what else? I don't know, making music, or I don't know. I bet I could be a really funny actor. I don't know. It's probably something more creative though, because my mom was a lot she was a career stage manager. So she worked in live theater, and as a kid growing up, it was okay, well, I'm going to baseball practice, and then tomorrow I have acting. So it's what? But, it was awesome because she was always in those environments. So I could just kind of tag along. And since that was part of my, I guess to some extent, it was part of my upbringing, right? It was just totally normalized in my mind that people are these really big personality, big exaggerated movement type people. And I was man, that's cool too. I don't know, maybe I would try and do something like that, something creative, music, or some kind of acting or something.
There you go. All right. So this is your ideal training day. All right. Go to PR song or music, and then your post-training meal. And if it's Memphis related, that's cool. If it's Toronto related, whatever's the best meal.
Waffle House. Next question. No, I love Waffle House, and I'm not changing that, but I just wanted to air that out first. No, man, we had a really funny little tradition at Campbell, and that's the place where I was for the longest. And I'm still in the group chat with those guys. somebody just lays like a beauty meme in there and it just like brightens your whole day. I talk to them more than I talk to some of my current colleagues, you know, just because I have access like that in the group message, whatever. But we were really close, man, the same way you are with any staff that you spend that kind of time with. And, you know, I remember listening to you guys talk about like training out at the, like at the storage locker and like that kind of thing. And it almost becomes like, you know, this is sort of invite only, buddy. Like, I'm not sure, you know, it starts to feel special. But we had this weird tradition where we would go like, I think it was Thursday or Friday, after the last football group, it'd be sometime like mid-morning, and everybody's just so zapped because it's like pretty much the end of the week. And we would just put the tunes on, and it's a little bit of everything. I really like, if I wanted to try and appeal to your side, I would say Deftones would be like my kind of go-to tunes. But I'm like, man, I'm all over the place. I really like training to like EDM music. Like, one of the things me and Dave used to joke about is if you want to lift fast, you got to listen to fast music. So it's like, we just throw the house music on in there. And like, once it kind of gets you going and that, you know, that pre-workout starts making you feel a little bit different. Like, I don't know, that was a lot of fun to me. And I like that stuff. Maybe it's because I'm from Canada. I don't know. But yeah, probably Deftones, maybe some EDM. Yeah, I'm happy with that. I'll stick with that answer.
I like it. Fast music, fast lifts. That works.
Yep.
All right, last one I got for you. Yeah. Last one I got for you. All right. You can take your time on this one if you need to. Number one indicator of a successful sports scientist and of an athlete. They can be separate.
Number one indicator of a successful sports scientist and a successful athlete. I don't think I'm qualified, to tell you the truth, to weigh in on that. But one of the things that I've spent a lot of time thinking about is really what success means to me as a professional, and to, you know, what does it mean to me really in a way that's sort of transcendent, right? Like, how do you know if you're successful in life? And I think the best answer I have right now is success to me is where it's where you're being challenged, whatever it is that you do professionally or otherwise, challenges you in ways that you want to be challenged and forces you to use skills that you're really proud of. And so I think that's where you get around, like, you know, you get around some of these other things that people might choose to define success with. And you can look at, you know, how well does it's just like happiness, right? How well does my subjective align with my objective? So for example, if I'm sitting here and I think, man, you know what, I should really have like Matt Rhea's job at Alabama. Of course I'm going to be unhappy. But if I'm sitting here and I'm seeing the opportunity that I have to make a difference in students' lives, as a member of our Human Performance Center, as someone who gets to also sort of like work with coaches and touch student athletes, like that kind of does it for me, you know, and it challenges me in all the ways that I'm like really proud of being able to be challenged, right? So connecting with people, you know, doing some of the actual implementation, like getting in there and doing some of these interventions with a couple of our teams, and like, you know, being able to still coach a little bit, being able to science a little bit, being able on the back end to do some of the data analysis. And then also like the biggest challenge of all, arguably, is like, okay, well, we did all that. What do these numbers mean? And actually sitting down now, and it's like, just when you think you're home, it's like, there's a mountain here and you got to sort out in 2 or 3 bullet points, what's our takeaway and how, like, what are we going to do about this? Because there's a coach on the other end of that waiting for an answer, and they trusted you enough to to come clean about what it is they're interested in. And they gave you the time that you asked for to do what you need to do to help them answer that question. And whether it's the answer they want or the answer they don't want, you need to address that question, right? Like, I'm gonna embarrass myself if I try and remember who said this, but you know, an approximate answer to the right question is worth infinitely more than an exact answer to the wrong one. And so, you know, when it comes down to how we go about setting up these projects and solving these problems, it's like, let's make sure the question is well defined, and then let's do exactly what we need to do to give us exactly that answer. You know, and even if we're just in the ballpark, at least we're turning something around that the coach has confidence is actually addressing what it is that they asked us to do. So that's it, man. I think success is about feeling good about the fact that you're being challenged in the things and you're being challenged to use the two tools you've worked so hard to acquire. You know, if you spend like we talked before we started recording, you spend your whole life trying to be a doctor, right? And then you find out you can't even pass the MCAT and you're working at Home Hardware. Of course, you're going to be unfulfilled, right? Because your identity, your what you think you should be doing and what you're doing are completely different. That's how I feel.
No, that's a great way to sum it up. And I think that's awesome to kind of hear that. I mean, your passion seeps out of it too when you go through and how you feel about it, like how intrinsically motivated you are to challenge yourselves and ask the right questions. And even if you don't come up with the perfect answer, like you understand that what you're doing has meaning behind it. And that's how you're defining success. And that's a really cool thing to do, rather than just put, like most people would put, monetary value or at a location or something along those lines. Like, I think you do what you can and you make the best of where you're at in that moment. And the rest, I think the rest will take care of itself. And that goes hand in hand with that stuff. So, hey man, what's up?
I said it does, man. The rest of it does take care of itself. When when you find that place where you're challenged in the way you want to be challenged, the rest of it takes care of itself.
For sure. Hey man, well, I can't thank you enough. How do people follow you? How do people connect with you if they've got questions? Some other, like you said, you don't want to get into a field that you don't think you want to be involved in forever. You don't want to get to the end of the day and like be finishing a master's and really change your mind. People that are interested in sports science or coaching or weightlifting or anything like that, how can they follow you or contact you if they got any questions?
If I can help anybody, I don't know if that's the case, but I am really, really happy to meet new people and chat and stuff like that. So I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter by the same name, Carnall, ACARNALL 85 is my username, 85, because I used to be an 85 kilo lifter, but that doesn't even exist anymore. So that's why that's there. Yeah, that's how you can get in touch with me. I actually just tweeted like last night a video recording of Dan doing a presentation about the Human Performance Center and stuff. So if people are curious to learn more straight from the horse's mouth about what we do, man, like that was an ACE's delivery on his part. So I would check that out. We're also launching a course, like a certification course, in probably the next, I don't know, sometime like just before or during the summer, where really anyone can take it. And it gives you access to him on the front and back end. And there's like modules designed around all just sort of different features about what we do and stuff like that. And I don't know, we're excited to see how that goes. But if you want more information about that or about us or whatever, yeah, just buzz me on Twitter or Instagram or something like that. And I'm happy to chat, really. I mean that sincerely.
Definitely. Hey, well, thanks again, man. I hope people take you up on that. I think what you guys, like, I've known you for a while. I know what you've been doing there in the whole Human Performance Center. I think it's awesome how it's set up, and getting to hear more information about it today and what you guys are specifically doing. I think you guys are on the forefront of kind of pushing this profession forward, and it's cool to hear, and it's good to catch up, man. So again, I thank you for coming on today.
No doubt, buddy. Glad to do it. Let's get the weekend started.
There we go. All right, man. Take care.
See ya.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors, Cerberus Strength. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.